It was a sunny afternoon when the Johnson family arrived at the airport, feeling excited for their trip. The hustle and bustle of the airport filled the air with a sense of anticipation. People rushed by, some with bags in hand, others walking quickly to their gates, while families said their goodbyes. The Johnson family, Marcus, his wife, Tasha, and their two young children, smiled at each other, eager for their vacation. They were dressed casually, enjoying the carefree mood of the moment. Marcus had worked hard for years to build his career and was finally able to afford something he had dreamed about, a private jet for their family trips. It wasn't just about luxury. It was about safety and comfort for his loved ones. He had always wanted to give them the best, to ensure they could travel in peace, away from the noise of crowded airports and long security lines. As they made their way toward the private terminal, the family's excitement grew. They passed through the airport's main entrance, and a few curious glances were cast their way. But they paid no mind. The Johnsons were used to being seen as a family just like anyone else, enjoying their day, headed to their flight. But little did they know, this day would take an unexpected turn. Tasha held the hand of their youngest child, Emma, as they walked beside Marcus, who was carrying the family's luggage. Their son, Jordan, skipped ahead, laughing as he ran toward the entrance of the private jet terminal. There was something peaceful about this space, far from the crowded terminals, with only a few people waiting, each of them seemingly on their own special journey. Marcus glanced at the jet parked just a few feet away. It was sleek and modern, its shiny surface reflecting the sunlight. He felt a moment of pride, knowing that his hard work had made this possible. The jet wasn't just a way to travel. It symbolized his dedication and the sacrifices his family had made over the years. It was a reminder of how far they had come together. As they neared the terminal entrance, a woman standing nearby turned her head and looked at them with an odd expression. She was standing by the entrance of the private jet terminal, waiting for someone. Marcus thought nothing of it at first, but as they got closer, he noticed her staring. The woman, wearing a bright red dress and sunglasses, quickly shifted her gaze away, but not before he caught the slight furrow of her brow. Odd, Marcus thought to himself, but continued walking toward the entrance with his family. Tasha, noticing the woman's gaze, gave Marcus a questioning look, but decided not to make a fuss. They had a trip to enjoy, and nothing, not even strange looks, was going to ruin that. The woman, now fully turning to face the family, stood stiffly, watching their every move. As the Johnsons got closer to the private terminal, the woman's gaze became more intense, lingering on them, and a sense of unease began to settle in the air. Tasha, a little uncomfortable by the woman's persistent staring, nudged Marcus gently. "Do you think she's okay?" Tasha whispered, glancing back toward the woman, but Marcus just smiled and shook his head. He wasn't about to let anything spoil the excitement of their departure. Little did they know, the woman was about to approach them, and the situation would escalate quickly. As the Johnson family made their way toward the private jet terminal, the woman in the red dress seemed to gather herself, taking a deep breath, as if she was about to make a decision. She looked over at Marcus and Tasha, and then, without any hesitation, she began to walk toward them. Marcus noticed her movement from the corner of his eye, and thought it was a little unusual, but again, he didn't think much of it. People came and went in airports all the time. The woman's heels clicked sharply on the polished floor as she made her way across the terminal, her eyes now fixed directly on the Johnson family. As she got closer, her steps grew more deliberate, and there was a certain determination in her walk. Tasha, who had noticed the woman's approach, gave Marcus a small nudge, sensing that something was off. "Is she coming towards us?" Tasha whispered, her voice laced with curiosity. Marcus glanced at her quickly and nodded. "I guess so. Let's see what she wants." The woman reached them just as they were about to enter the door to the private terminal. She stood in front of them, blocking their path. With a wide smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, she spoke, her voice louder than necessary. "Excuse me," she said, looking at Marcus first, and then scanning Tasha and the children. "Can I ask why you're here? Is this some sort of mistake? You do realize this is a private terminal, right?" Marcus paused for a moment, surprised by the question. He had been traveling for years, and in all that time, he had never been questioned in such a way. He looked at Tasha, who raised an eyebrow, as if wondering the same thing. "I'm not sure I understand," Marcus said, trying to keep his tone friendly but firm. "We have a flight here. Everything's in order." The woman didn't seem convinced. Instead, she took a step closer and looked Marcus up and down. "You don't exactly look like you belong here," she said, her words dripping with an odd kind of judgment. "I mean, are you sure you're at the right terminal?" Marcus blinked in disbelief, the rudeness of her tone becoming clearer with each word. Tasha's hand tightened around Emma's, and Jordan, sensing the tension, stopped skipping around and quietly observed the exchange. "We're flying out of here," Tasha replied calmly, keeping her voice steady. "Everything's fine." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Well, if you say so," she said, clearly unconvinced. She then turned her attention to the private jet parked just outside, the one that had caught their eye earlier. "And just what kind of flight do you have?" she asked sarcastically, as if she had already made up her mind about who they were and where they were going. Marcus was starting to feel frustrated, but he didn't want to escalate the situation in front of his kids. "We're flying in our private jet," he said simply, pointing in the direction of the plane. The woman's face twisted for a second, as if she didn't believe him. "A private jet? Really?" she said, raising an eyebrow. "That's quite the claim. I mean, I can't imagine someone like you affording such a thing. Are you sure this isn't some mistake?" Tasha's patience was wearing thin now. "I don't think we need to explain ourselves to you," she said, her voice taking on a sharper tone. "We're just here to board our flight." The woman didn't back down. Instead, she continued to stare at them, her expression now a mix of disbelief and judgment. "I just find it hard to believe," she muttered under her breath. "People like you don't just show up here." Marcus looked at Tasha, who gave him a small nod. It was clear they needed to end this awkward encounter before it escalated any further. But the woman wasn't done yet. She crossed her arms and stood in their way, not ready to let go of her strange assumptions about them. As the woman continued to stand in their way, Marcus and Tasha exchanged an uncomfortable glance. The tension was growing, and the last thing they wanted was to make a scene, especially in front of their children. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to keep calm, but he could feel the irritation building inside him. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice firm but still respectful. "We don't need to explain ourselves. We have every right to be here." The woman didn't move, and her expression didn't soften. She shook her head slightly as if she were disappointed in them. "I just don't get it," she muttered, her voice still raised. "What kind of people show up at a private terminal like this without even looking the part? It's just strange." Tasha felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment, but she wasn't going to let this woman get under her skin. She stepped forward, putting herself between the woman and the kids. "You don't know anything about us," Tasha said, trying to remain calm but finding it harder with each word the woman spoke. The woman, however, wasn't backing down. She crossed her arms over her chest, still eyeing them as if they were out of place. "I've been flying for years," she said. "I know how these things work. People like you don't belong in a place like this." Marcus' patience was wearing thin. He was no longer interested in trying to reason with someone who was so determined to judge them based on assumptions. He glanced at his family, and they all stood quietly, waiting for him to handle the situation. "Look," Marcus said, taking another deep breath. "We have tickets for this flight, and we're here to enjoy our trip. I don't need to explain myself any further. If you have an issue, you should speak with the terminal staff." But the woman was relentless. Instead of stepping aside, she continued to follow them, getting closer. "You're just going to walk away from this without explaining. Are you even supposed to be here?" she asked, her voice getting louder. A few bystanders had noticed by now, and some were starting to whisper to each other, clearly uncomfortable with the scene unfolding. Marcus turned to Tasha and gently placed a hand on her arm, signaling that they should keep moving forward. "Let's just go," he whispered, not wanting to drag this out any longer. But the woman was not ready to give up. As they tried to walk past her, she suddenly raised her voice even more, turning to a nearby security officer who had just walked into the terminal. "Excuse me," she called out. "This family is trying to board a private jet, but they don't belong here. I'm telling you, there's something off about this." The security officer, who had been casually walking through the terminal, stopped and turned toward them. His face was neutral, but he seemed to sense the tension in the air. Marcus, now fully aware of the growing attention they were receiving, felt his frustration bubbling over. "We're fine," Marcus said to the officer, trying to sound confident. "Everything is in order, and we're just here to board our flight." The security officer nodded but then glanced at the woman who had caused the commotion. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice calm but authoritative. The woman wasted no time. "I'm just saying," she began. "I've been flying for years, and I know a scam when I see one. People like them don't just show up at a private terminal without reason. I want to know why they're here." The officer gave Marcus and Tasha a quick look, assessing the situation. Marcus could feel the eyes of the crowd on him, and the last thing he wanted was to be caught in a back and forth with someone who clearly didn't know when to let things go. But he had no choice but to explain. "We're here for our flight," Marcus said again, his tone growing more serious. "This is all legitimate. We're not causing trouble." The officer, after taking a moment to listen, looked back at the woman. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside, ma'am," he said. "It's clear everything is in order. You're creating a disturbance." The woman, realizing she wasn't getting anywhere, huffed loudly. She muttered something under her breath, but it was clear she was losing the argument. She shot one last glare at the family before turning and storming off, her heels clicking louder with each step as she walked away, leaving the Johnsons standing in the middle of the terminal, their nerves still on edge. As the woman walked away, Marcus could feel the tension in the air slowly start to ease. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off the uncomfortable exchange. But the situation wasn't completely over yet. The security officer, who had been listening quietly, turned back to the Johnson family with a calm, reassuring smile. "Everything seems to be in order, sir," the officer said, his voice steady. "I'll let you through. Just ignore her and enjoy your flight." Marcus nodded gratefully, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. Tasha gave the officer a small smile, her grip on Emma's hand loosening as the situation began to settle down. The children, who had been unusually quiet through the ordeal, now relaxed a little, their curiosity growing about their upcoming adventure. As they walked toward the entrance to the private terminal, the officer stepped aside, allowing them to continue. His eyes lingered on the family for a moment, perhaps noting that they were carrying themselves with quiet dignity despite the drama. Marcus felt a sense of pride that despite the woman's attempts to make them feel out of place, they had stood firm and handled the situation calmly. "We're almost there," Marcus said to Tasha, trying to make light of the moment. "Just a few more steps, and we'll be on our way." Tasha smiled back at him, her earlier frustration still simmering but softened by his words. She nodded, grateful that it was almost over. "I just don't understand people sometimes. Why does it have to be so hard for some people to believe others can have success?" Marcus squeezed her hand, knowing she had a point. People will always make judgments based on what they see. It's our job to prove them wrong by simply living our lives. Their children, having sensed the mood shift, began to chat excitedly again. Jordan asked when they would be able to board the jet, and Emma asked if there would be snacks on the plane. Their innocent questions were a welcome distraction from the tension that had just passed. The private terminal was a small and quiet area, a stark contrast to the crowded, noisy main terminals they had passed through. There were only a few other passengers, each waiting for their own flights. The sleek, modern design of the terminal made it feel like a peaceful escape from the chaos of regular airport terminals. Marcus was thankful for the tranquility, but he couldn't help but feel a little bit uneasy. The woman's comments had shaken him more than he cared to admit. As they approached the private jet, a staff member was there to greet them, ready to assist with their luggage. The man greeted them warmly, his professionalism making Marcus feel a little more at ease. He gave a polite nod to the staff member, thankful that things were going back to normal. Tasha looked over at Marcus, her expression softening. "I'm just glad we don't have to deal with her anymore." Marcus nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, it's better to just leave people like that behind." The kids were now practically bouncing with excitement, eager to board the jet. Jordan ran ahead, his energy contagious, while Emma clung to Tasha's side, her wide eyes taking in the large plane in front of them. It was their first time flying in a private jet, and the excitement was clear on their faces. As the family moved toward the jet, Marcus couldn't help but feel a little bit of pride again. They had worked hard to get to this point, and no one, not even a rude stranger, could take that away from them. He looked over at Tasha, who was now smiling as she watched the kids' excitement. It felt like everything was falling into place. With one last glance at the terminal behind them, Marcus stepped onto the jet, and the door closed behind him. They were ready to leave the stress of the airport behind them and enjoy their well-deserved vacation. Whatever judgments others had, it didn't matter now. The journey was theirs to take. As the door of the private jet closed behind them, a sense of calm settled over the Johnson family. The brief tension of the past few minutes began to fade away, replaced by the excitement of their upcoming trip. The jet was far more luxurious than anything they had ever experienced, and they took in the sleek interior with wide eyes. The kids immediately rushed to the windows, pressing their faces against the glass to get a better view. Jordan's voice rang out with excitement as he pointed at the runway, trying to guess which plane might take off next. Emma, still in awe, whispered to her mom about how she couldn't believe they were actually going to fly in such a big, beautiful jet. Tasha chuckled softly, kneeling down to adjust Emma's seatbelt. "I know, sweetie. It's amazing, isn't it? But we need to sit down now so we can take off safely." As they settled into their seats, Marcus leaned back, letting out a quiet sigh of relief. The ordeal with the woman at the terminal was behind them now, and it felt good to be on their way. He looked at Tasha, who was helping the kids, and couldn't help but feel grateful for everything they had worked for. They had earned this moment, and no one could take that away from them. The flight attendants, two friendly women in crisp uniforms, moved through the cabin, making sure everyone was comfortable and answering any last-minute questions. The air was filled with a calm sense of luxury. Smooth leather seats, large windows offering a perfect view of the sky, and everything meticulously arranged to make their journey as comfortable as possible. "Everything okay over there?" one of the attendants asked with a warm smile, pausing by their row. "Can I get you anything to drink before we take off?" "Just some water for now. Thank you," Marcus replied, his voice relaxed now. Tasha nodded, and the attendants moved on to the other passengers. As the jet began to taxi down the runway, Marcus glanced out the window, watching as the familiar airport lights blurred past. He felt a small pang of pride in his chest, knowing that this moment was the result of years of hard work. They had faced challenges, sacrifices, and moments of doubt, but now they were here, on their way to a well-deserved vacation. This jet wasn't just a symbol of success. It was a reminder of how far they had come together. The engines roared to life as the plane sped down the runway, and soon they were in the air, climbing higher and higher into the sky. The smooth ascent was almost surreal. No bumps, no turbulence. Just the steady hum of the engines and the quiet comfort of the jet. The kids pressed their faces to the windows, marveling at the view of the city below, shrinking as they soared higher. "Look, we're above the clouds," Jordan exclaimed, pointing out the window at the sea of white below them. His excitement was contagious, and Emma giggled as she leaned over to see for herself. Tasha smiled as she watched them. "This is what we've worked for," she said softly, more to herself than to Marcus. "This moment, this family, our future." Marcus nodded, reaching over to hold her hand. "We've done it, Tasha. We've made it." For a moment, they sat in peaceful silence, the noise of the world far below them. The kids chattered excitedly about everything they could see out the window, and Marcus and Tasha exchanged smiles, feeling a deep sense of contentment. They had created this life, and nothing, not even a harsh judgment of others, could take away the joy they felt in this moment. The plane continued to climb, the horizon stretching wide in front of them. And as they soared above the clouds, the worries of the world below seemed to fade away. All that mattered now was the journey ahead, the memories they would make as a family, far from the distractions and tensions they had left behind. As the jet cruised smoothly through the sky, the stress from the earlier encounter seemed to melt away. Marcus leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes for a moment and just letting the calm wash over him. He could hear the quiet hum of the engines and the soft chatter of his family, but for the most part, everything felt peaceful. Tasha, sitting beside him, was quietly watching the kids. Emma had settled into her seat, content with the snack the flight attendant had given her, while Jordan, as usual, was full of energy, asking questions about the clouds and pointing out everything he could see through the window. "Look, Mom, the sun is shining so bright," Jordan exclaimed, his voice filled with wonder. Tasha smiled at him, her heart swelling with affection. "It is, sweetheart. It's beautiful up here, isn't it?" It was moments like these that made all the hard work worth it. Marcus glanced at Tasha, who caught his eye, and gave him a soft smile. They didn't need to say anything. Both of them knew how much this moment meant. The past few years had been filled with challenges, but here they were, enjoying a calm and perfect moment in the sky. After a few minutes, the flight attendants came around again, offering drinks and snacks. Marcus accepted a coffee, enjoying the warmth that spread through him as he took a sip. It was the little things like this, comfort and relaxation, that made the experience feel so luxurious. "We're just about to hit cruising altitude," one of the attendants said, walking by with a friendly smile. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." "Thanks," Marcus said, nodding as he glanced out the window. The view was breathtaking. They had left the busy world behind and were now floating high above the clouds, with nothing but blue skies ahead. The moment felt surreal, almost like a dream come true. Tasha settled back in her seat and looked over at Marcus, her expression thoughtful. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes it's easy to forget how much we've been through to get here. We've worked so hard for this, and I'm so proud of us." Marcus smiled at her. "I am too. We've come a long way, Tasha. And this is just the beginning." They didn't need to say much more. They both knew how hard they had worked to get to this point, and how much they had sacrificed along the way. But now, sitting in the comfort of their private jet, with their children happy and excited, it all felt worth it. As the kids continued to talk excitedly about the trip, Marcus leaned back, feeling a wave of contentment. The earlier encounter with the woman at the terminal seemed like a distant memory now. It had been a brief moment of discomfort, but it had been handled. The judgment from someone who didn't know them didn't matter anymore. They were on their way to a peaceful, enjoyable vacation, a time to reconnect, relax, and make memories. Jordan, having finished his snack, turned to his parents. "How long until we get there?" he asked, his eyes bright with anticipation. Marcus chuckled. "Not too long now, buddy. We're almost halfway there." Emma, who had been quietly watching the clouds, looked up at her dad. "What's it like up here, Daddy? It's so quiet." "It's peaceful, sweetie," Marcus said, his voice gentle. "Up here, it feels like the world is far away, and everything is calm. It's like we're floating above everything." The kids nodded in understanding, still looking out the window at the endless blue sky. For a moment, it felt like time had slowed down, and they were all suspended in this perfect bubble of calm. The worries, the stress, and the chaos of the world seemed so far away, and for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt completely at ease. Tasha leaned her head on Marcus's shoulder, and he kissed the top of her head. They didn't need to say much. Words weren't necessary when everything felt right. The future was bright, and they were together. Everything they needed in that moment was right here with them. The flight continued smoothly, and the Johnson family was finally starting to unwind after the stressful moment earlier. Marcus and Tasha exchanged a quiet look, both silently agreeing that the trip had finally started to feel like the relaxing getaway they'd been hoping for. The kids were happily engaged, with Jordan now drawing pictures of the clouds he'd seen outside, while Emma played with the small toys she had brought along. The hum of the engines and the soft sounds of their children's chatter were soothing, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere. As the flight attendants moved through the cabin, offering more snacks and checking on everyone's comfort, Marcus leaned back in his seat, allowing himself a moment to fully relax. The luxury of the jet, the peacefulness of the sky, and the company of his family, it all felt like a reward for the hard work he had put in over the years. Tasha caught his eye and smiled. "I think this is the most relaxed I've felt in a long time," she said softly. Marcus chuckled. "I agree. It's nice to just sit back and not worry about anything." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the peaceful sound of the jet's engines filling the space between them. Every now and then, Marcus would glance over at the kids, making sure they were happy and content. Jordan was busy with his drawing, while Emma had fallen into a quiet daydream, staring out the window. As they neared their destination, the captain's voice came over the intercom, alerting them that they were beginning their descent. The plane would soon be landing. Marcus looked out the window one more time, taking in the view of the distant land below. It was hard to believe how far they had come, both literally and figuratively. The family was on their way to a new adventure, and there was a sense of excitement building again. Jordan sat up, his curiosity piqued. "Are we almost there?" he asked, his voice full of anticipation. Tasha smiled and nodded. "Yes, we'll be landing soon. You're going to love it there." Emma, hearing the excitement in her brother's voice, sat up straighter in her seat too. "I can't wait. What do you think it will be like, Mom?" Tasha looked out the window as the plane began its descent, feeling a sense of calm mixed with excitement. "I think it's going to be perfect. We're going to have so much fun, and it's going to be a great time for all of us." Marcus nodded, his eyes still focused on the land below. "We've earned this," he said quietly. "This is our time to relax and enjoy what we've worked so hard for." The descent was smooth, and as the plane got closer to the ground, Marcus could see the city or countryside below, depending on where they were headed. The excitement in the cabin was palpable now as everyone prepared for the landing. The kids couldn't stop talking about what they would do once they landed, and even Tasha was starting to feel the rush of anticipation. As the plane touched down gently on the runway, the family exchanged smiles, relieved to have arrived safely. The gentle braking brought them to a complete stop, and the flight attendants began preparing the cabin for disembarkation. "Welcome to our destination," the flight attendant said with a smile as she moved down the aisle, ready to guide them out of the plane. The moment they had been waiting for had finally arrived. Marcus helped Tasha gather their things, and the family made their way toward the exit, ready for the next chapter of their trip. The excitement in the air was contagious as the children's chatter grew louder. They were finally here, and the adventure was just beginning. It had been a long journey to get to this point, full of hard work, determination, and some difficult moments. But now, in this new place, with the horizon ahead of them, everything felt right. They were ready to experience everything the world had to offer and create memories that would last a lifetime. As the Johnson family stepped off the jet and onto the tarmac, the excitement was undeniable. The air was fresh, and the sun shone brightly above them, welcoming them to their destination. The children rushed ahead, eager to explore their new surroundings. Marcus and Tasha followed closely, taking in the view of the landscape before them. The adventure they had been dreaming about had finally begun. They had arrived at a small, peaceful destination far from the busy, noisy city they were used to. The quiet surroundings were a welcome change, and it felt like the perfect place to unwind. The air was clean, the atmosphere calm, and the gentle breeze seemed to whisper relaxation to them. A few airport staff members met them as they walked across the tarmac, ready to guide them to their next destination. The staff smiled and offered friendly greetings, their faces warm and welcoming. It was clear that this place was different. It had a more personal, down-to-earth feel than the busy airport they had just left behind. "Everything looks perfect," Tasha said, her voice filled with happiness as she looked around. She could feel the stress of the past few days slowly melting away. Marcus agreed, a contented smile on his face. "I think this is exactly what we needed. A change of pace, a chance to breathe." The kids were already looking ahead, their eyes wide with excitement at the possibilities. Jordan, who was always full of energy, was practically bouncing on his feet as he asked, "What are we going to do first? Can we explore the place?" Tasha laughed, her heart light. "Of course, we'll take a walk around. We'll explore together and make a plan for everything we want to do while we're here." They were escorted to a small, comfortable car, and soon they were on their way to their accommodations. The car ride was filled with the sounds of laughter and chatter as the kids eagerly discussed what they imagined the place would be like. It was clear that they were already falling in love with the idea of being somewhere new, a place where they could just enjoy the moment and escape from the pressures of daily life. As they drove through the countryside, Marcus and Tasha exchanged looks, sharing a quiet moment of understanding. They had worked so hard to get to this point. Years of sacrifice, challenges, and personal growth. But none of that mattered now. All that mattered was that they were here, together, ready to create new memories. The ride was peaceful, and soon they reached a beautiful villa nestled in a serene part of the area. It was exactly what they had imagined. A spacious, elegant home surrounded by lush greenery, with views of the rolling hills in the distance. The place felt like a dream come true, a perfect blend of comfort and beauty. As they stepped out of the car and into the villa, the family's excitement reached its peak. The children immediately ran to explore, their voices echoing through the house as they discovered all the rooms. Tasha and Marcus exchanged a smile, their hearts full of gratitude. They had worked so hard to create a life where moments like this were possible, and now it was all coming to fruition. The evening passed quickly, and soon the family was sitting down to a meal together, sharing stories and laughter as they reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Marcus looked around the table at his family, his wife, his children, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was the life they had built, and it was worth every effort, every late night, and every sacrifice. The rest of the vacation was everything they had hoped for. They explored the local sites, enjoyed peaceful days in nature, and spent quality time together. There were no worries about work or the stresses of everyday life. They were free to enjoy each other's company, to laugh and relax in the way they had always dreamed of. As the vacation came to a close and they prepared to head home, Marcus couldn't help but feel a deep sense of contentment. This trip had been more than just a break from routine. It had been a reminder of why they worked so hard in the first place. It was for moments like this, moments of peace, joy, and connection, moments that would stay with them forever. The Johnson family returned home with hearts full of gratitude and memories that would last a lifetime. They knew that the road ahead would have its challenges, but they were ready to face whatever came their way, knowing that they had each other and the strength to create the life they wanted.